26 people have been sentenced to death in 2024. Alexis Daniel Rosas, California. 29-year-old Alexis Daniel Rosas was sentenced to death for the murder of 18-year-old Michaela Jean Mazie. Maury Duarte, 32, Rosas' girlfriend, was found guilty in June of first-degree murder and special circumstances charges of lying in wait, killing a witness to a crime, and accessory to a felony. In August, she received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Rosas, a known member of an Indio street gang, also known as Trigger, had been at conflict with Mazie's boyfriend, Abram, for a while. The hostility escalated on June 24, 2019, when Rosas went to an abandoned house where Abram and Mazie lived and shot him in the chest. Mazie saw the incident and reported it to Indio police right away. After being admitted to the hospital, Abram eventually recovered from his injury. In order to protect herself after the shooting, Mazie checked into a Motel 6 in Indio. However, Rosas discovered her whereabouts and the fact that she had contacted the police, which led him to plot her murder. They used Duarte's 2005 Toyota Camry for transportation after he asked her for help. The victim was forcibly restrained inside the Toyota that Duarte drove to a vacant property after Rosas convinced her to leave her motel room in the early hours of June 25, 2019. Once at the scene, Rosas told the woman to begin walking toward the gate after shoving her out of the car. She was kicked in the stomach by Rosas and she fell to the ground. Michaela was then shot 5 times by him. She was shot in the head once. Despite knowing that he had killed her with the second shot, he kept shooting her. The semi-automatic pistol he used to shoot Mazie was dumped on a roadside as he and Duarte returned to Indio, leaving the victim where she had been killed. Rosas was identified as the murderer during a sheriff's investigation after Mazie's remains were found a few days later. On June 30, 2019, the pair was arrested on Indio's Avenue 42. Chad Daybell, Idaho. In a case that prosecutors say was motivated by power, money, and apocalyptic spiritual beliefs, Daybell was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy charges in the deaths of his first wife, Tammy Daybell, and 2 of his second wife's children, 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. The death punishment was recommended by the jury. The sentence was given approximately a year after Lori Vallow Daybell, Daybell's second wife, was found guilty of killing her children and given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She was also found guilty of planning Tammy Daybell's murder. Authorities have stated that Tammy Daybell was discovered dead in her Idaho home on October 19, 2019, just a few weeks before Chad Daybell married Vallow Daybell, and that they believe Tylee and JJ were killed in September 2019, the month in which they were last seen. The final sightings of Vallow Daybell's 2 children from a previous marriage occurred on separate days in September 2019. Tylee Ryan was a normal, vibrant teenage girl who cherished her friends. Her younger brother JJ needed particular care because he was autistic. Since they hadn't spoken to JJ recently, family members contacted Rexburg, Idaho police to do a welfare check on him in late November 2019. Authorities were told that JJ was staying with a family friend in Arizona, as they did not find him at the family's house. Instead, they saw Vallow Daybell and Daybell, who said everything was okay. The couple was gone by the time officers returned the following day with a search warrant. In the end, they were located in January 2020 in Hawaii. The bodies of Tylee and JJ were discovered by law enforcement in June 2020 on Daybell's land in Fremont County, Idaho. In May 2021, Daybell and Vallow Daybell were charged with murder. Prosecutors said Tylee was murdered between September 8 and September 9, 2019, while JJ was killed between September 22 and September 23. Daybell, 55, is a self-described doomsday cult prophet with strong religious convictions who set out to lead a group of 144,000 individuals to be saved during the second coming of Jesus Christ in 2020. Although the death sentence is rarely applied in Idaho, it has gained increased attention in the aftermath of Daybell's strange case and the case of Brian Koberger, an Idaho murder suspect who has been accused of killing 4 students at the University of Idaho in November 2022. Idaho was the 5th state to legalize the use of firing squad as means of execution last year. The legislation became operative on July 1, 2023. Only Mississippi, Utah, Oklahoma, and South Carolina have laws allowing firing squads. Christopher Turner, Texas. Turner, 48, was sentenced to death by a jury for the murder of Anwar Ali. At approximately 6:15 a.m. on March 27, 2020, Ali was killed at the Superbig Country Mart located south of Fort Worth. Ali, who emigrated from Pakistan to pursue the American dream, was characterized by the prosecution as a kind person. Authorities said that although Ali complied with all of the requests, Turner, a convicted criminal, went into the Superbig Country Mart, put a gun to his back, forced him to open the cash register, forced him to his knees, and then executed him in the bathroom. When Turner escaped in Ali's minivan, he found more than $50,000 in cash. He then went on a shopping spree using Ali's money and credit card to buy jewelry, cars, substances, clothing, and other items. In the end, U.S. Marshals in Colorado apprehended Turner while he was in possession of the murder weapon. Gregory Nome, Texas. Newsom was convicted of killing Panola County Deputy Chris Dickerson in 2019. Around 2 a.m. on December 31, 2019, Newsom killed Deputy William Christopher Dickerson when he was traveling through East Texas from his home in Shreveport, Louisiana, during a traffic check in Panola County. In addition to $5,500 in cash and an illegally obtained AR-15 with a drum magazine that held 60 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition, Newsom was also carrying a significant amount of Mary Jane. According to the prosecution, he killed Deputy Dickerson in order to evade being taken into custody for the illegal goods he was transporting across state borders. Newsom was stopped, jumped out of his car, and started shooting at Deputy Dickerson, hitting him many times. As he fell to the ground, Dickerson returned fire, hitting Newsom in the legs, causing non-life-threatening injuries. Dickerson was left to die from his wounds on the side of the road after Newsom left the scene. Newsom also opened fire on other officers during the ensuing pursuit before flipping his vehicle and being taken into custody. He still had the murder weapon when he was arrested about an hour after Deputy Dickerson was killed. Gurprit Singh, Ohio. Singh was found guilty of shooting and killing his wife and her family in an apartment in Westchester Township. In 8 days, prosecutors called 34 witnesses describing a costly affair and damaged family ties due to financial difficulties. They claimed Singh was the only one with the opportunity and motivation to carry out the murders. There were no defensive wounds, and each victim received several bullet wounds to the head for a total of 16 gunshot wounds. Singh's deteriorating financial situation and frequent demands for money had caused tension in his relationship with his father-in-law, as Singh was unable to support his way of life. According to testimony from a lady he dated, he helped her pay off her mortgage, purchased her a luxury SUV, and contributed $20,000 toward her down payment on an Indianapolis home. Singh also purchased a property on the same street as the woman, intending to move his family there, and he went there with family members a few weeks after the murders. Prosecutors said Singh lied to police about his affair and his presence at home during the event, citing evidence that he entered the residence over half an hour before calling 911 to report the shooting. He never mentioned being home when his family was killed, but in a taped interview, he told detectives that he had just returned home when he discovered the apartment door open and his family on the floor bleeding. Investigators discovered the murder weapon, a 9mm handgun, submerged in a pond behind Singh's apartment shortly after the shooting. Singh, according to the prosecution, lied to avoid being investigated by the police and meticulously planned the murder of his family, including canceling work and making arrangements for his 3 children to leave the residence. He first shot his father-in-law while he was lying in bed, then he shot his wife, his mother-in-law, and his wife's aunt. Gustin Ray Woodman, Arizona. Woodman was sentenced to death for the murder of 72-year-old Mark Woodruff. Woodruff was discovered with a gunshot wound to his head in the driver's seat of his car, which was still running and parked in his driveway, early on June 24, 2014. Although just one 9mm round casing was discovered close to the victim, detectives from the Glendale Police Department discovered evidence during the investigation indicating another gunshot had been fired through the car door. When police searched Woodman's car 2 days after during a traffic stop, they discovered a 9mm Taurus handgun. They found a spent 9mm round casing lodged in the gun's chamber. The Glendale Police Department's forensic unit examined the casing and determined that it was connected to the 9mm shell casing discovered at the scene of Woodruff's murder. Investigators also discovered that Woodman had chosen to follow and rob the victim after spotting him at a gas station and noticing cash in his wallet. Jason Allen Thorberg, Texas. For the murders and dismemberments of 3 individuals in Fort Worth, Texas, Thorberg received a death sentence. The murders he committed were allegedly motivated by his reading and interpretation of the Bible, which led him to commit sacrifices to God. Thorberg was an apprentice electrician at the time. The first murder was thought to have occurred sometime between September 15 and September 17, when Thorberg killed 42-year-old David Lueras, who had been staying at an inn since July 2021 and shared a room with Thorberg. However, the precise date of the death was not made public. Thorberg sliced Lueras' throat before chopping up the body and even eating a portion of his heart. Thorberg would kill 2 more women, 32-year-old Maricruz Matis and 34-year-old Lauren Phillips, during the course of the 4 days after Lueras' murder. According to Thorberg, 2 days after killing Lueras, he slashed the neck of one of the female victims and strangled and stabbed the other 2 days after killing the first female victim. Thorberg also mutilated the women's bodies and stored their body parts in a storage bin after each killing. In addition, he committed by eating some of the women's body part and even had relations with Phillips's corpse before he dismembered it. Following the 3 killings, Thorberg took the body pieces to a neighboring dumpster on September 22, 2021 and burned them. Residents and authorities were alerted by the fire, which resulted in Thorberg's arrest. He took full responsibility for the serial killings and also admitted to 2 more murders while he was being held in custody for these ones. One in Arizona in 2017 and another in May 2021. Thorberg had carried out the murders for sacrificial motives, same as the Fort Worth serial killings in 2021. In the 2017 case, Tanya Begay, Thorberg's 37-year-old girlfriend, and a Navajo woman from Gallup, New Mexico, went missing in March 2017 after she and Thorberg went on a trip to Arizona and never came back. Between March 3, 2017 and March 13, 2017, Thorberg was accused of killing Begay at an unidentified site in the Navajo Nation in Arizona. The victim of the May 2021 case was Mark Jewell, 61, Thorberg's former roommate, who perished in a Fort Worth, Texas home fire. Thorberg had admitted to cutting Jewell's throat, unplugging a natural gas line, and lighting a candle, which resulted in the fire that is said to have killed Jewell. Following this admission, on February 18, 2022, a different grand jury indicted Thorberg separately on charges of Jewell's murder and arson. Thorberg was named as a suspect in Jewell's murder prior to his arrest for the September 2021 serial killings, but he was not taken into custody until the serial killings occurred because of insufficient evidence. Jeremy Tremaine Williams, Alabama. He is on death row for the murder of 5-year-old Cameron Holland. In a sick twist of events, the little girl was in fact sold to Williams by her own mother for relations. The woman charged $2,500 for 1 hour with the toddler. Christy Hoskins, Cameron's grandmother, had reported her missing from their Columbus, Georgia home before the little girl passed away. Officers from the Columbus Police Department discovered Cameron's body with evidence of asphyxiation and decay in the abandoned house where Williams had lived. The child's mother, Christy Sipple, was charged with human trafficking. She faces up to 20 years in prison, but I think she should be facing the death penalty as well. Williams had been implicated in at least one other child abuse case in Alabama prior to this conviction. He was accused of child abuse in Phoenix City in 2009, but was acquitted by a jury in 2012. Jerome Rogers, California. Jerome Anthony Rogers, 68, was charged with strangling Mary Beth Blasky, 76, at her house on Fremontia Drive on November 14, 2012, and Wanda Lee Paulin, 86, on North Mountain View Avenue on December 12, 2010. He was a local handyman at that time. In 2013, Rogers was charged with Blasky's killing and essay. Her 2001 Lexus was gone and her house had been looted. In a house where Rogers was sleeping, several other objects thought to have been stolen from her home were discovered. DNA evidence connected Rogers to the crime. He told detectives that he knew Colin and that she had been killed while he was incarcerated. Rings were stolen off Colin's fingers, and her house had also been robbed. In December 2012, around the time of the second murder, tipsters would report seeing Rogers with objects they believed were inadequate for him. DNA evidence also linked him to Colin's murder. I really don't understand why it took so long for him to be sentenced to death. It's been years since the murders. Jerry Don Elders, Texas. Elders is on death row for murdering 61-year-old Robin Waddell while on the run from police back in 2021. Following an hours-long manhunt that started with the shooting of Burleson police officer Joshua Lott and the abduction and killing of Waddell, Elders was taken into custody in Gainesville on April 14, 2021. According to Burleson police in 2021, Elders shot Lott during a traffic stop just before dawn while he was with a group of other people. After leaving that car, the three men allegedly carjacked Waddell outside the house in the 8000 block of County Road 802. Waddell arrived to the Joshua Police Department with gunshot wounds at 8:44 a.m. She passed away in the hospital. Jose Vladimir Larin Garcia, California. 24-year-old Jose Larin Garcia was sentenced to death for a 2019 shooting that resulted in 4 murders. On February 3, 2019, shortly after midnight, Palm Springs police received reports of gunfire on East Sunny Dunes Road, where a car had collided with a wall in front of a house. The bodies of Juan Duarte Raya, 18, Jacob Montgomery, 19, and Juliana Garcia, 17, were discovered inside. Campos Rivera, 25, was discovered dead on Cannon Drive, a few blocks away. They had all been shot dead. Larin Garcia was apprehended the next day at an Indio bus stop. According to the police, a friend bought him a Florida ticket using a false identity. Larin Garcia had taken the 3 victims to Campos Rivera's house, where he had made arrangements to buy tablets from one of the other passengers. During the exchange, Campos Rivera was shot and killed by Larin Garcia. After the car drove off, Larin Garcia shot the driver and killed the 3 passengers in the car before leaping out. Officers discovered Larin Garcia hiding beneath a truck next to the wrecked vehicle, where he had taken off some clothes. After being brought to the hospital, he fled that evening and remained unaccounted for until being apprehended at the bus stop. Joseph David Hurd, Mississippi. Hurd, 41, was condemned to death just 1 day after being found guilty of the capital murder of his 2-year-old stepson, Hayden Lee Bataille. In January 2022, Joseph and his 24-year-old wife, Haley Lynn Hurd, were initially arrested following the discovery of Hayden's body in Biloxi on December 27, 2021. When Haley called 911 at 6 in the morning after discovering her kid unconscious and speculating that he may have drowned in the bathtub, officials were initially alerted to the situation. Following his transfer to a nearby hospital, the toddler was declared deceased. The couple was first detained and charged with felony child abuse, but according to police documents, the boy had several bruises all over his body and a broken bone that was consistent with torture. As a result, the charge was raised to capital murder. Haley acknowledged that Joseph repeatedly punched the boy while holding him by the arms with one hand. In order to silence the boy's screams, Haley covered his mouth. Hayden soiled his diaper in the hours before she called 911, and he waited too long to fetch a juice box from the kitchen. Joseph lost his temper because of this and started repeatedly hitting the child in the head and chest. In the months before the murder, Joseph was Hayden's primary caregiver. He would make the toddler sit on a potty training seat for hours on end. He would use a spatula to pop blisters from a second-degree burn on his hand and frequently boast about beating the child to Haley via text messages. Haley agreed to testify against Joseph and pled guilty to a reduced charge of first-degree murder. She is incarcerated in the Mississippi Department of Corrections for life. Julio Rivera, Florida. After serving over 25 years in prison for murder in New York, Rivera was released on probation and went to Florida, where he murdered Roberto Ovalle, his childhood friend. On December 8, 2019, Julio Rivera, 52, shot Roberto Ovalle, 40, in the efficiency living space that had been converted from a storage unit off High Banks Road. Ovalle was a drug dealer who kept heroin and Mary Jane in the storage unit where he allowed his childhood pal Rivera to reside. Rivera had violated his probation and was wanted in New York. Prosecutors claimed that Rivera had been offended by Ovalle. Rivera inquired as to what he would gain from a trip to New York, which Ovalle was organizing. Ovalle remained silent, later saying he would gain the fact that he will continue to be allowed to remain in the storage container. Rivera shot him in the head shortly after that. On August 29, 1993, Rivera robbed a store in New York. He was taken into custody and appeared in court for the offense. Next, he shot someone in the hand while robbing them on October 24, 1993. He then carried out another heist on December 11, 1993, killing the victim this time. After 24 years in prison, he was released on February 19, 2019. He killed his friend shortly after that. This man belongs behind bars. He should have never been released. La Jeromeni Latex Brown, Alabama. He is on death row for killing a police officer. The murder happened during an undercover drug operation in October 2019. Brown told the judge that he went to a house on Laverne Street to sell 100 pounds of Mary Jane. He did, however, tell jurors that he felt robbed and used his gun to defend himself. He was careful to point out that the officers never said they were undercover. He didn't know they were policemen. Marco Antonio Perez, Alabama. He is on death row for the murder of police officer Sean Tudor 5 years ago. On January 20, 2019, Perez shot and killed a mobile police officer at the Peach Place Inn condominiums. Because he had missed a meeting with his pretrial services officers over a firearms charge, a federal warrant had been issued for Perez's arrest, and he was then evading the police. Testimony states that Tudor received a tip on Sunday that Perez was at the apartment complex off of Leroy Stevens Road in West Mobile while he was at home in Daphne. Perez was just 19 years old when he committed the murder. Marcus Fishburn, Florida. A judge sentenced Fishburn to death for the murder of Aisha Levi, the 25-year-old girlfriend of his roommate. When Fishburn's roommate returned from work to see his unit covered in blood, investigators were called to the Green Tree Place apartments on Princeton Square Boulevard. Investigators discovered a woman inside the apartment, who they later identified as Levi. They thought she had been killed in a struggle. Her body had been wrapped and placed into a closet-based plastic storage bin. Shortly before he got on a bus bound for Indiana, Fishburn was detained and taken into custody at the Jacksonville Greyhound bus terminal. Investigators were informed by Fishburn that he and Levi had an altercation. In the days before the murder, Fishburn consumed substances and was possibly still under the influence. Michael Colin Mitchell, Alabama. In the fatal shooting of Lavon McCreary and her unborn child, a jury voted 10-2 to recommend Michael Colin Mitchell, 43, of Evergreen, to be put to death. McCreary was shot in front of her 2 children, a 5-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, at the Pick and Save grocery shop in Evergreen in 2019. She was 28 years old and pregnant at the time of the shooting. Michael Harrison Hunt, Florida. In an incident that claimed the life of a teenager and seriously injured 3 others, he organized a deliberate attempt to kill a witness against him in a human trafficking case. The 58-year-old Michael Harrison Hunt was convicted of 3 charges of attempted first-degree murder in addition to first-degree murder. On April 4, 2019, Hunt organized the break-in at a residence in Cove where the victim of human trafficking who was scheduled to testify against him was staying. The intended victim managed to hide and avoid harm, but Alexandra Lexi Peck, 19, was shot and killed because she looked like the victim. Despite being shot in the throat, her stepfather, Danny Scoggins, managed to crawl next door to get assistance. Since then, he has undergone more than 60 medical procedures. Paig The Lawyer, Texas. He was convicted of murdering his girlfriend and her 10-year-old daughter. He strangled Otishay Womack, 30, and Kamiria Womack, 10, in April 2018, according to the prosecution. Inside their Fort Worth condo on Shandy Lane Drive, their remains were discovered. The flat had previously been visited by police on multiple occasions for domestic violence. Beginning in January 2017, the man was charged with choking his girlfriend in 2 of those cases. According to a medical examiner, The mother and daughter were strangled to death. A week following the crime, Lawyer was taken into custody by U.S. Marshals in Tennessee. Patrick McDowell, Florida. During a traffic stop in 2021, Deputy Joshua Moyers was shot and killed by Patrick McDowell. During his sentencing trial, McDowell himself urged jurors to give him the death penalty. The reason for this murder, according to his lawyer Alan Chipperfield, is that McDowell was a veteran who served in the Marines in Iraq and returned from his service suffering from PTSD. He claimed that McDowell would not be facing these accusations if it weren't for his PTSD. Brianna Toll was previously sentenced to 3 years in prison and 3 years of probation for her attempt to help McDowell in escaping capture after entering a guilty plea to accessory after the fact. McDowell entered a guilty plea to 8 counts of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, and injury to a police dog. After following McDowell from a local gas station, Moyers attempted to pull him over, but McDowell told Gail, a passenger in his car, he would not stop. Eventually, however, McDowell pulled off US 301 into Sandy Ford Road and stopped just short of the train tracks for Moyers. McDowell had some arrest warrants under his name, so he decided to give the officer a false identity. When Moyers came to the van to ask for their IDs, McDowell reportedly reached beneath his seat for his gun. However, when the deputy asked, McDowell said that there were no guns in the van. According to detectives, the burgundy minivan had been stolen from Jacksonville, and Moyers discovered that when checking the tag. The railroad crossing arms abruptly came to life, accompanied by flashing lights and deafening bells. In the footage, Moyers looked at the crossing arms for a brief while before turning around and being shot right below the eye by McDowell, who had a gun in his face. McDowell swiftly leans out of the van and fires again at Moyers, striking him in the back, according to the dashcam footage of Moyers. Then, as the arms descend, he puts the gas on full blast and drives across the track. The woman in the car, Gail, was released soon after by McDowell. She was the one to call 911. Richard Bishop, Florida. In connection with Patrick Parrish's death, Richard Bishop Jr. was charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of corpse abuse. He was charged along with 33-year-old Courtney Ingram, his girlfriend. After officers performed a welfare check on May 8, Parrish's body was discovered beneath his home. 9 days later, the suspects were taken into custody. Bishop said that he killed Parrish by accident after he snapped at a party. Investigators claim that Parrish enraged Bishop by making advances toward Ingram following the gathering. Despite not intending to, Bishop exploded, struck Parrish with a wrench, and struck him twice more, killing him. Bishop hit Parrish so forcefully that following the initial blow, his eyeball stood out. He concealed the body beneath the house and took Ingram and Parrish's pickup and fled. Robert Brown, Nevada. 54-year-old Robert Brown was given the death penalty by a Nevada jury for a 2012 murder. This is the first time a Nevada jury has imposed the death penalty in over 5 years. After storming into his girlfriend Nicole Nick's apartment, assaulting her, shooting and wounding her mother, and firing at a 3-year-old girl within the residence, Brown was convicted of killing Nicole Nick, 29. According to court records, Brown and Nick had been fighting just hours earlier. When prosecutors argued for Brown's death sentence during the trial's punishment phase, Chief Deputy District Attorney J. Roman highlighted Brown's violent past and conduct against women. He was convicted of carjacking in 1998, forcing himself into his ex-wife's vehicle and using a box cutter to cut her face, neck, and arms. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the crime. Roman also brought up an altercation in which Brown began striking someone who didn't even defend himself when he was being held at the Clark County Detention Center. Roman maintained that after killing Nick, Brown tried to hide his identity by donning gloves and a mask. He then left Las Vegas and evaded capture for 2 years. In the 10 years it took for Brown's case to go to trial, he insisted on his innocence and dismissed a number of court-appointed lawyers. Despite Nick's mother, Esther Mestas, identifying Brown as the guy who shot her, defense lawyers contended that there was insufficient forensic evidence linking Brown to the crime scene. Since 2006, no one has been executed in Nevada. Scott Dozier, the last inmate to forego his appeals, took his own life while incarcerated prior to his execution. Sean Finegan, Tennessee. Finegan was found guilty in the killing of Jennifer Gail Paxton. Paxton's body was stored in a freezer in the bedroom for almost 8 months. Finegan then relocated it to a spot beneath his bed before police arrived to search for it, and it was discovered in early August 2020. In December 2019, investigators believe she was strangled to death. Rebecca Dishman, 26, Finegan's girlfriend or fiancée, told police that he killed Paxton by strangling her with string for a long time while taking breaks and pausing to smoke. Dishman entered into a plea deal with the Office of the District Attorney General, promising to testify against Finegan in exchange for a life sentence and a guilty plea to first-degree murder. Paxton was abducted by Finegan in December 2019 and detained in his Oak Ridge residence. There, he attacked her and essayed her several times before killing her by strangulation. Jennifer Gail Paxton was 35 years old. Victor Alejandro Godinez, Texas. On January 23, a jury found Godinez guilty of capital murder of a peace officer for the shooting death of Moises Sanchez, a Texas Department of Public Safety trooper, on April 6, 2019. After undergoing surgery in Houston, Sanchez passed away in August of that year. In addition, Godinez was found guilty on 2 counts of attempting to kill a peace officer by shooting at 2 Edinburgh detectives who were responding to his manhunt. 4 months after being shot in the head and shoulder in Edinburgh while looking into a car accident in which Godinez had escaped, Sanchez passed away from his wounds. Sanchez responded to the car accident when the driver fled on foot, according to the Texas Department of Public Safety. After locating Godinez close to the location, the trooper was shot. Renee Flores, the defense attorney, said that Sanchez's death was not caused by the gunshot wound to the head, but rather by complications following surgery on his skull. Prosecutors argued that the operation was necessary because of the gunshot. Wade Wilson, Florida. Wilson killed 2 women in a matter of hours on October 7, 2019. Wilson met the first victim, Christine Melton, at a live music club, and she was strangled in her house. Diane Ruiz, a bartender and mother of 2, was lured into Melton's car under false pretense later that day. Wilson was driving that car. She was strangled and then repeatedly ran over. Shortly after, he called Stephen Testaseca, his biological father, and admitted to killing the women. The next day, Wilson was taken into custody after Testaseca and his wife called the police. He said he would be willing to do it again to investigators. In his court testimony, Wilson's father described specifics of his telephone confession. According to Testaseca, his son ran over Ruiz after finding she wasn't yet dead, but he was unable to provide an explanation beyond the simple statement, "I just wanted to do it." Zephen Xaver, Florida. 27-year-old Xaver killed 5 women inside a bank in January 2019 by forcing them to lie down on the floor as he fatally shot each one. In Sebring, Florida, he systematically carried out the murders in the foyer of a SunTrust bank. Minutes before the murders, he texted an ex-girlfriend saying, "I always wanted to kill people, so I'm going to try it today and see how it goes." From obtaining his driver's license to getting the gun used in the shooting that day to only entering the bank after a male customer had already left it, Xaver had meticulously planned the killings. He relocated from Indiana to Sebring in 2018. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 2016, but was released after 3 months. Xaver informed the police that enlisting in the military was a way to kill people and get away with it. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.